Hi guys. So back to Kant. Okay. So we have discussed about statements of mathematics being synthetic. Okay. So we mentioned kind of sum of angles in a triangle being equal to 180 degrees. We mentioned 5 plus 2 equals to 7. So now here is a really interesting question. If these judgments, statements are a priori synthetic, well, they must not be empirical. They're not things in this world. So, where do they come from? Kind of an interesting, super interesting question. So, um, if this is your first time, kind of dealing with this kind of philosophy, this is extremely, extremely confusing stuff. It's hard, okay? But, okay, just let me make it clear, okay? A priori statements do not are not empirical. So what if something is empirical? Well, it's a posteriori, so kind of taking place in space and time. So um, a posteriori are facts about this world, such as the Eiffel Tower is how many meters tall. I have no idea, but maybe you can tell me. So that's an empirical a posteriori judgment. So it's really clear to kind of say if something is not a priori, then what is it? So by definition, if something is not a priori, it's a posteriori. So anything that's an empirical fact, a fact about this world, something you can sense with one of your senses. By the way, there is this nonsense which a lot of people still believe that we have five senses. I mean, we have way more than five senses, okay? But most people believe it. But whatever can be sensed, okay? If you can touch it, see it, taste it, it's empirical and it's not a priori. So, and since we're talking about these mathematical abstract concepts such as circle, triangle, number, well, where do they come from? I mean, if these are a priori concepts, they do not come from this world. You cannot uh, touch, sense, smell, lick them. They exist in somehow outside of this world. They're not empirical. And here's the fascinating answer to this question, according to Kant. They come from mathematical things come from our intuitions of space and time. Now I know this is pretty damn confusing perhaps, but one of the early chapters in the Critique of Pure Reason is called Transcendental Aesthetic. Okay, transcendental means a priori, essentially, not empirical, not something you can experience with your senses. And once again, it's not five; it's more like 25 senses humans have at least. Um, so transcendental aesthetic. So transcendental, like I said, is a priori, and aesthetic means it's pretty tricky, what it means, but it does not mean your perception of art. How we say like something is aesthetically beautiful. So you might be led, to think that that's what he's talking about. That's not the case. Okay, aesthetic means perceptibility. Kind of sensation, intuition. You can say feeling. You can say our experience of. So transcendental aesthetic means our a priori sensibility of space and time. That's what you can kind of think about it. So our uh, you know what do we know about space and time a priori? Not things in this world. Not the Eiffel Tower and the cookie in your kitchen. Things a priori, outside of space and kind of what can we know about space and time a priori? Well, that's what transcendental aesthetic deals with, and according to Kant, that's where mathematics comes from. All these lines and triangles and circles and numbers, they come from our a priori knowledge of space and time. So when we are making a true a priori statement, such as sum of uh, angles in a triangle equals to 180 degrees. By the way, let me make a little side note. That's really not true either, because that it's true in Euclidean geometry. But we also have a hyperbolic and a hypobolic geometry, in which sum of angles of a triangle could be more or less than 180 degrees. And I have a video on non-Euclidean geometry. If you guys are kind of curious in this particular point, feel free to check it out. So, mathematical objects come from space and time. That's the key insight of the Transcendental Aesthetic chapter.